Hi, I'm excited as you begin or reestablish your interest and engagement in developing a mindfulness practice routine, one that will serve you well for a lifetime. Here, I'm interested in sharing with you some suggestions and tips based on my own experience and the experience of many who have found the mindfulness practice to be meaningful to them and have found ways of really integrating it into their life in a way that is somewhat seamless and supportive as opposed to an effort. And so, because the next couple of weeks really will perhaps set in motion what a much longer time span might look like in terms of the habits that we establish early on, I'm offering you what I think would be helpful to really optimize what that foundation for your practice can look like and feel like and translate into in a very pragmatic and real sense. So, the big picture look that we'll have is one of time, place, and manner. And I'll speak to each of these with some suggestions. Ultimately, you are the architect of your life. You're the architect of the way you engage in the practice of mindfulness. So always trust yourself and know that, of course, that I'm just offering suggestions. But these are suggestions that I will suggest that you uh, apply for a couple of weeks, unless there's something about any of the suggestions that either don't feel right for any particular reason or are just pragmatically impossible, in which case you'll want to find a modification or a tweak. I want to encourage you to sort of go with the flow of what I'm suggesting. And then after 2 weeks, if it seems like it's not really working or having traction, to then begin to modify it. The beginning of a practice, there's a lot that's new and there's a lot that we're sort of experimenting with, and it's easy to sort of say, that didn't work, I didn't like that, or I don't think that practice was as good as it could have been, I wasn't as relaxed, or whatever it is that really are largely, except for being good to yourself, red herrings. It takes time to develop a practice, and so we don't want to necessarily be making a little shift here and there every time we do so, as we're continually, making some adjustment. Let 2 weeks pass is my suggestion. All right. So time. What time of day to practice? In the morning. You certainly can practice anytime you like, and I'll work backwards as to why it is that I think the morning is the best. At night, which is what many people will default to early on, you're likely to be tired. You're likely to have less sort of energy and motivation, and you're likely to fall asleep. And so while a mindfulness practice could be helpful, some of them for falling asleep, it's really not a mindfulness practice. It's a falling asleep relaxation practice. And that's different. It's being used in a different way than it's intended. Earlier than that, well, you set up a time and something comes along. You get a message from somebody has an idea, they want to do something, you learn something about work or about an assignment the next day, and all of a sudden your plan sort of gets thrown off, and then you're continually moving it to, I'll do it in an hour, or I'll do it in an hour and a half. And maybe that'll happen, but oftentimes it doesn't. And then it gets pushed back to the very end of the day, and I've spoken to that, or it just doesn't happen. It's like, we'll do it tomorrow. We don't want to be hard on ourselves when that happens. It'll happen from time to time, but we do want to sort of set ourselves up for success. And so the earlier in the day that we plan to practice, the more likely we are to have more control over that time of the day. Less has been set in motion, and in my experience, it's much more likely to happen, and it's much more likely to be available at the same time in the same place the earlier that we do it. Also, you are able to see the benefits of the practice earlier if you do it earlier, because you have a whole day, especially over time, to see how things are a little different because of that morning practice. Plus, you get something done, and that can be a nice thing. So I'm suggesting earlier. Now, people will say, oh, I've got kids, or I've got all this work that I do early on, my exercise routine and all this other good stuff, great stuff. Probably not a higher priority than practice, but that doesn't mean that you can't intentionally carve out time from your already ritualized routine morning to be able to insert this important part of this project of learning about mindfulness and practicing mindfulness. Ideally, you roll out of bed and you roll onto the chair or onto a cushion and you practice for 12 minutes, which let's say is the average amount of time you might aim to practice. Maybe you go to the bathroom and then you make your way there. The sooner you can get into your practice spot and practice, the more likely I think you'll find it to be set as part of your day, and then becomes easier and easier and easier, much like brushing teeth. We don't think twice about the time that we spend brushing teeth, and that's because it's just is so much a part of our long-term habit, and that's what we're in some ways developing here. So find that time as early as it can be. Let people know if that's relevant, what you'll be doing, so they know not to interrupt you during that relatively brief period of time. All right, that's time. While my strong suggestion is that you do it in the morning early, even if that means waking up 15 minutes early, that's for people who say, I absolutely have no time, well, then wake up 15 minutes earlier. And if you say, I can't wake up 15 earlier, I need my sleep. Sleep is important, and I agree with that, then go to bed 15 minutes earlier. That usually is a good idea for most of us anyway. But that being said, if you're able to find another time before lunch, after lunch, right when getting to the office, right when getting to school, right after coming home, if you're able to find that time and to have it reliably available to you in a very sort of, well-structured way, more power to you. That is just fine. It works just as well. It's just, in my experience and the experience of many, it's harder to set that one up. All right. Time, place. Where do we practice? Well, ideally you practice at home, and ideally, I would say, at least starting out, you practice in a location that you set aside specifically for practice. This could be in a room that you normally aren't in. This could be in a part of your living room where you normally aren't sitting. There's reasons why, if we have it be a little bit out of the ordinary routine of our day in terms of where we're sitting or where we are, it can be helpful, and I'll address that in just a moment. So it could be a chair, it could be a cushion. As between a chair and a cushion, there are advantages to both. A chair, you've already got one. The downside to a chair is that many chairs have you sitting back, and we really want to be supporting our posture, almost holding it up without the back of a chair. So if you have a chair, it's fine. And there's another video to address chair and cushion considerations, but you'll want to sit back as much as you can so that you're sort of propped forward a little bit, but always comfortable. And if you're on a cushion, if you buy a cushion, whether you buy one that's made for meditation, that can be very, very helpful for that posture and sitting upright, and also having it feel a little special, a little different. But again, comfortable. No need to do too much stretching and twisting of the legs, just crossing legs and being comfortable. And there's a lot of low-lying accessories in this regard. There's cushions, there's benches, there's things that you can buy if you want to spend, $20 or $30 or $40 or so for that. But you could also take a cushion off the sofa and sit there. When I travel, oftentimes I'll take a cushion off of a chair in the hotel room and do that. It does suffer likely for being a little softer and not as supportive of posture, but it can work. Sometimes two of them can work. You could also sit on the floor or on a mat. Just the downside to that is that it could be uncomfortable with your legs sort of and your knees up because you're so low to the ground where you're sitting. And so as long as you're comfortable and you're not straining or doing any harm to the body, because you will ideally be doing this 5 or more days a week, and possibly for a very long time, we want to be attentive to that. So I suggest a cushion, but if not a cushion, the chair is fine. And if you're going to be on either, to be comfortable and to have it where you are sitting upright. And again, there's another video to offer you more specific instruction on that. In terms of the location, why somewhere else? Why not just where you normally sit on the sofa or where you normally sit at a desk in your room or at the kitchen? There's no reason why you can't. You certainly can. And for the long term, we want to be able to drop in and do a formal or informal practice anywhere, at a board meeting before it starts, or at our desk before we go off to a client meeting, or in the library. So we want to be able to do it where we are and not out and about in the world have to find a special place to do it, kind of a thing. But if we're sitting at the chair that we normally are sitting in, then we're likely to be surrounded with the things that were normally surrounding us. We might have things around us that remind us of things, and it just has more stimulation, sounds and sights, especially sights, etc., that are likely to, and just habit. You're usually sitting there, and maybe you sit in this place and you periodically get up and go into the kitchen to get a cookie or something. Well, now you're sitting there, and that tendency to sooner than later get up and look for something to eat, that might kick in. So we're able to find another location which is somewhat freed from the conditioned habits of mind and of circumstance that can, at least at the very beginning of practicing, learning to practice, can make it more challenging than it needs to be. And of course, if you take that little area that you set aside to practice, it's temporary, so you don't need to have it where you set it up and it can't change. At home, I do it in a certain area of our living room where after I finish practicing, I move the cushion, put it away. But if you have an area that can be sort of devoted to the practice, you can put up little pictures or things that might be supportive of the practicing that you're doing, so that when you go over there, especially as you begin to practice, it feels a little special, it feels a little different. There's something satisfying about it, just in terms of the way you're setting it up, let alone in terms of what the practice offers us. But a reminder, as I think I mentioned a few moments ago, this isn't anything special. We're just sitting and we're training our attention, and we're learning ways of being a little bit more present and steady with our attention and our capacity to be aware of our environment and not be so pulled away and so emotionally affected by the things that happen around us and by the thoughts and feelings that will come and go within us. So there's nothing special per se, and yet there's something special in every moment that we might miss sometimes, and we're tapping a little bit more fully into that. All right, manner. So I'll address now eyes open or closed, mouth and nose, how are we breathing, and where, if we're going to focus on the breath, do we focus on the breath. Eyes. I'm going to suggest closed. Close the eyes. We're toning down the visual field. There's a lot of stimulation that comes in from the visual field. It can be a little bit more inclined towards being a slightly more relaxed state, less likely to be, caught up in the things that we see. We're very visual creatures. That being said, if it's in any way uncomfortable to close your eyes, then don't. Look down with a soft gaze, maybe looking at a spot on the ground or nothing in particular. That's fine too. Or if you'd like, your eyes can be open and you could just be sitting here like this. In fact, for the long game and what we're really achieving, if we want to put it into those terms, it's really being able to be more mindfully aware as we go through our day. And of course, our eyes are going to be open much of the time. But as we're practicing and we're training, there's reasons why for many people closing the eyes can be helpful. But it really does depend. And there's different traditions out there. Some have eyes wide open and they don't close them. So there's no right or wrong, but there is what would be maybe most useful to you starting off. And I'm going to suggest closing the eyes. Breathing. Now, when we get into, and you get into breathing practices for relaxation or for enhancing focus or things that have to do with manipulating the breath, this becomes an even more important conversation. But what I'll say now holds true in a certain sense, even then. If you can, breathe in and out through your nose. If you are a mouth breather and it's hard to breathe through your nose because you're just not used to it, or you have a structural, maybe a deviated septum, then by all means, breathe in or out through your mouth. But if you're able to breathe in and out through the nose, I would encourage you to do that. Oftentimes there'll be the instructions to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And so again, there's many, many different traditions and many different practices, and certainly in the breath work world, there's many, and that would be fine. But if you're able to, breathing in and out through the nose. Many of the practices will begin with the instruction to take a few slower, deeper breaths, and if you're comfortable doing so through the nose as well. Alrighty. Where do we focus our attention? The instruction might very well be, as it is with many practices, to focus your attention on the sensations of the breath. Well, we know the sensations of the breath, where the breath makes contact with the body, and that could be the nostrils, where the air flows into and out of the nose. Could be the mouth, if your mouth is open, where you feel it coming into and out of the lips, or across the lips, or in the mouth. It could be the chest, as the chest is moving with the breath. We oftentimes don't want to have the chest really being a primary agent of the breathing, but nonetheless, it's what we can feel. And then there's the belly, sort of expanding and softening with the breath. I'm going to suggest the belly, that you focus your attention on the sensations of the belly. There's a variety of reasons for that. One of them is because we actually do want, it's useful to have like belly breathing, where the belly is moving. And oftentimes we can spend much of our time with the breath being held, shallow breath. The belly's not moving so much. That's not so helpful, not so healthy in many ways, or as healthy as it could be. So it just naturally orients us in that respect. A lot of times we can spend time with more chest breathing, which is a little bit more effortful, a little more of the musculature that's called upon and less of the diaphragm. And so to not have that be the thing that we're sort of working on purpose. The nostrils is a terrific place to focus attention, but it's a little more challenging to focus attention on a more subtle sensation of the air flowing into and out of the nose, or the mouth, if you choose the mouth. So the belly is sort of, if you will, it's a larger target. It's a little easier to notice those sensations, to stay with those sensations, and I think it's a good place to start and to practice for a lifetime. But again, there's different traditions, there's different approaches. The nose and the nostrils is a very popular one. Find the one that resonates with you. Again, I encourage you starting with the belly. Give it a stay with it for a couple weeks if comfortable enough, and then decide what to do. Now, as it relates to the focusing on the sensations of breathing, you may find that that's not comfortable for you. Many people find it to be comfortable or comfortable enough, but you may at various times find it not to be comfortable. It could be, for example, that you're sick and it's hard to breathe. And if that were the case, then we wouldn't necessarily want to focus on the sensations of breathing, just because there's too much sort of getting in the way of that clean read of the sensations of the breath. It could also be that for whatever reason, you find that to be uncomfortable. And so there's no reason to force it, just as it doesn't matter if the eyes are opened or closed. The eyes is a secondary consideration to the practice, just like it doesn't matter really whether you're breathing through the mouth or the nose. That is a secondary consideration. One approach in those regards might be supportive of optimizing the development of a practice, but they're secondary concerns. And so too is whether the object of attention is the breath. So you might choose to instead listen to the hum of an air conditioner, and oftentimes there will be that sort of persistent sound. You could notice the sensations of the hands, if you have one hand, say, resting in the other, or of your feet making contact with the ground. or of your body sitting in the chair. So any one of those could be the object that you focus your attention on. And it could even be that you open your eyes and you look down and you maybe have a candle or a rock or something, something relatively neutral. That meaning it's not prompting you to think about things. You'll have enough thoughts without needing a prompt. And that could be the object. So you need not have it where the breath is the object of attention. The manner of practice in that respect could have it where you choose something else as an object. I would encourage you, though, early on to select the object and stay with the object. The nice thing about the breath is, among other things, that wherever you go, it's there. It's relatively easy to attend to, and it's relatively neutral. And we want to have an object that isn't too stimulating in that sense. Alrighty, I hope this is helpful to you. I encourage you in advance of beginning the formal practicing that you identify when during the day and where. And then when you begin to practice, that you draw upon the manner of practice in an intentional, informed way. And I hope that this video has been helpful in that regard. Wishing you all the best.